Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our Let's Talk tonight, the shades between black and white. My name, for those that don't know, is Becca Cotto, and I'm the Director of Racial and Social Justice for YWCA. And I'm super excited about all our guests tonight and this conversation. It's a little bit different, I think, than those that we normally have, but we often concentrate on the racism on Black individuals in our country, which is absolutely necessary, but sometimes we miss the conversation of those others that also, are experience those things at the hands of racism. So I'm going to just read a brief bio of everyone and then give you guys a few minutes to introduce yourselves. And so we have Nena Todd, who is the Historic Site Supervisor at Old State House Museum. Nena's worked in the field of cultural resource management for 35 years with Delaware Division of Historical and Cultural Affairs. She started as an archaeological interpreter at the Island Field Site, a Native American burial site sharing archaeological information and Native American culture with the public. Today, Nena serves as the Historic Site Supervisor for the Old State House Museum, where she oversees the daily operations. In the 1990s, Ms. Todd revived the Kent County chapter of the Archaeological Society of Delaware after decades of being defunct. She enjoys partnering with many cultural institutions, museums, universities, and historical organizations in sharing history and culture. Next, we have Pei-Jen Hickey, who is the Coordinator of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion for YMCA Delaware, not to confuse it with YWCA. Ms. Hickey is responsible for developing and integrating of the YMCA's Delaware's workforce diversity strategy for hiring and developing diverse talent, fostering an inclusive work environment, and ensuring management accountability. Ms. Hickey's ambition is to help the YMCA of Delaware expand conversations and understanding of diversity, equity, and inclusion for the wider community. Before joining the YMCA, Ms. Hickey participated in the Public Ally Program, AmeriCorps, a corps at University of Delaware. She started her career in business development and marketing, working internationally for multinational companies, including IBM and Mercedes-Benz. Ms. Hickey was born and raised in Taiwan and received her bachelor's degree in international relations from National Taiwan University. And she continued her education at the University of California, Berkeley and Indiana University. She currently lives with her husband and 2 teenage children in Garnet Valley, PA. Balleto is the community engagement specialist at the Delaware Art Museum. And you've probably seen him wearing fatigues and a bandana around Wilmington's music scene, or maybe you have heard him on the radio talking about how hip hop and culture events can heal communities. For over 2 decades, he's been instrumental in organizing music festivals, breakdancing competition, public graffiti art for organizations like 302 Guns Down and Guerrilla Republic. You can find him on stage at rallies and protests or in parks speaking to the youth, always spreading a message of peace, love, and respect. What you might not know is that he also works at the Delaware Art Museum as a community engagement specialist. Part of his work has helped this institution develop community partnership with people and organizations that many, if not most, museums have neglected to engage in the past. Communities that are increasingly younger and more diverse. Is a Peruvian native born and New York raised and now resides in Wilmington, Delaware. As a hip hop activist and community organizer, Brother Is raises social awareness through grassroots cultural events in the tri-state area and worldwide. He's been awarded the 2014 Humanitarian of the Year at the Black National Theater in New York for his activism in the inner city. He is also the recipient of the 2022 News Journal Most Influential People of Activism and Social Justice. Is co-founded Guerrilla Republic, an international hip hop organization of over 20 chapters worldwide. He's also an active member of 302 Guns Down and the Council for Delaware Art Museum. He serves as the vice president of the Roberto Clemente Baseball League and has been instrumental in bringing the proclamation and recognition of Indigenous Peoples Day to Newcastle County. Sorry, guys, I know that was a lot, but I have such great guests that I can't help it. So if you guys wouldn't mind, we'll start in the order that I just kind of read. And if you will just, say a little bit about yourselves other than what I just read, maybe, feel free. We'll start with, I think I started with Nena.
Okay. As Becca said, my name is Nena Todd, and I work for, I've worked in cultural resource management for 33 years. You said 35 years. I think I wrote that wrong. I'm sorry, I was a misprint. For 33 years. And I work for the state of Delaware for the Delaware Division of Historical and Cultural Affairs. And I do oversee the daily operations of the historic Capitol building, the old State House. I hail from Kansas. I was born there, just as hundreds of generations before me were. I have 4 American Indian grandparents. We were known as the mound builders back in the day. We farmed, we fished, we hunted, we loved, we laughed, we played, we cared for one another. We mourned for those who had crossed over. And we were stewards of the land and the living environment, the land that we belonged to. We were all of those things. We were called the human beings then, and today we still are. I know that there was a question, I don't know if it's coming up, on when did I become aware about race? Do you want me to talk about that?
No, we'll get to that one. But I think there definitely was one about kind of like how you grew up and where you came from. So I think you kind of covered that one. So thank you. And Pei-Jen, if you want to go ahead and talk about the two kind of, where you grew up and just some of your experiences.
Sure. So my name is Pei-Jen Hickey. Pei means cultivate, develop. Jen means truth, real authenticity. So every time when I introduce myself, it remind me of what my parents want me to be, I guess, to be real. It's in Chinese. So I was born and raised in Taiwan, which is a very dense populated island of China. It's 7 times of Delaware, but 23 million people live on the island. I came to United States in year 2000 and became a citizen in 2008. So I'm an immigrant, Asian American, and I consider, if I do the calculation, I'm 14-year-old American. So I'm a teenager in my American citizenship. So I'm still learning. I'm learning every day, and I love my new role at the YMCA Delaware. It's a newly created role since last year. A couple of our leadership formed this equity team after George Floyd's murder. And this role, the diversity, equity, and inclusion coordinator, was born from the leadership team, from the equity team. So I've been working in my current capacity for just a little bit over a year. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And Is?
Well, a lot of my peoples know me as Brother Is, and there's a reason for that too as well. But I was born in Peru, and my people are from Barranco. My origins is from YWCA. And I came to America, and but didn't have an easy start. Got deported with my mother, and we made our way back though. Then grew up in New York City in Brooklyn, Flatbush Church Ave, and had a tough background. Ended up in a group home at the age of 13 at the Covenant House in Manhattan. And then I emancipated myself at the age of 16. I no longer wanted to be a part of that system because it was, I don't know how to tell people about a group home, but it feels more like prison, to be honest with you. So I had to learn my way in life through there. And the struggle to find out about yourself, that's why these conversations are important, because it can change your direction where you're going from there. It took me a while though. At the age of 27 is when I moved out of New York and I moved into Delaware. But I made a decision that I wanted to start somewhere fresh, and nobody knew me. Nobody knew about my struggle, my trouble. And I didn't want it to be following me, because I realized, for me personally, sometimes when we surround ourselves, especially when you grow up in an environment I did, the people, all they do know is just, survival. And that includes a lot of crime in your life. But I just felt in my heart that wasn't me. I felt there was more than me. And I'm grateful that I did get a new beginning. And I remember looking for a job out here. I would wait under the Ellesmere Bridge with other migrants, and I would jump in the back of a pickup truck and do what I can. But I was also bilingual, so that helped me out. And then one day, a person gave me an opportunity to be a manager to temp service. And I just felt that I was living in the same system again, back in the group home. Everybody trying to survive, and I just felt like there's more to life to this, and there's more to life for my migrant people too. And it made me sad to realize that, we're working for minimum wage without any insurance. And when you ask our people, like, who were you when you're in your country? And they'll tell you, I used to be a lawyer, or I used to be a teacher. But now we have to survive and work, below minimum wage at times. But I was just grateful, like, the opportunities. But as I kept evolving, something clicked in me. And I was just like, you know what? I wish I had somebody to tell me what I can do and what I could live. And I wish I had a mentor. And I ended up living on Adams Street, actually in the apartments that recently were condemned. And one day I walked up into the Latin Community Center, and I said, I want to help the children. I want them to understand from my perspective, we don't have to repeat this, because I knew that there was an issue here. I thought that leaving New York, I was leaving all the crime behind, the way people live. No, this was worse, because to me, I felt like nobody had a purpose with it. I was just like, what are you doing it for? And I was just like, I don't want them to fall in the same trap that I did, or fell in the same obstacles. And I decided to be a mentor, and I got my clearance. I did all the background check, all that stuff. So I was happy. I was like, dang, okay, I got a chance. But I never stopped, and I never looked back. And since then, I've been an advocate, like I said, for 302 Guns Down, Guerrilla Republic. And Guerrilla Republic is same thing with 302 Guns Down, people who have been incarcerated, people who have had troubles, but we want to fix it from within. Because I felt like a lot of people came from the outside, had great suggestions, but didn't really understand the struggle we were living in. And I felt the only way we're going to fix this is ourselves. We have to start learning how to be self-reliant. We need to start taking responsibility for our communities and our blocks. And I just started advocating and pushing forward, and I just started reaching out. And people thought I was crazy when I first came out here, because they were like, who's this guy yelling out, come out here and show support? And the reason why I use hip hop culture, because it is a vibration that our young people feel. And the drums do something. And if you put some lyrics with knowledge behind it, you can move people. And I'm telling you this, from a young brother that grew up in New York City, and the origins of hip hop culture, started fighting police brutality, started addressing poverty. That was the purpose of hip hop culture being alive and being brought together. It was the only time that all the gangs came together and made a truce. And people don't realize that. I'm just like, so many different types of tribes, and we'll just say gangs, but I call them tribes now, because as we evolve, you start realizing this is our human characteristics. This is what we do naturally.
Mhm.
We try to look for people to protect us, to look out for us. And we're just youth, they're, misguided, without any direction, just trying to survive. And that's why I became such an advocate for it, because I felt that we needed to take responsibility too of the culture as hip hop. I felt because a lot of people don't even know the meaning of hip hop. Hip means knowledge, hop means movement. So you're supposed to take that knowledge and you're supposed to move with it. That's the definition of hip hop. A lot of people never realize it. Then you got rap. For me, I'm just gonna be honest, I'm not trying to hurt nobody's feelings, but rap is one letter away from rape, which means it keeps on taking and taking and taking. And we fall in that trap. And we have to learn to separate that. And I tell people, like, I have to educate people personally. If it doesn't have any knowledge in it, you can't call it hip hop. You have to understand that if it's not teaching you nothing, you can't give it that label. It's being mislabeled. And people didn't realize in the year 2000, and I don't know if you remember a song of anybody, an artist named Nas. And in the year 2000, he said, hip hop is dead. Very powerful song that resonated around the barrios, the ghettos, because in that year, That's when the corporations took over the culture and they pimped it out to the people, and they didn't realize that. So people were asking, how come hip hop culture changed so much? It wasn't up to us no more. They took that power away from us, and they don't realize how many record companies are invested to private prisons. And people need to look into that. What is motivating that? What is putting people back? What's making people think that that's all right? They need to look at the record labels that are investing in that, because people of color are a commodity in prison. We're stock. And we have to learn, you know, to teach our youth not to be a part of that, because I'm like, there's no point of us trying to live free if we're going to end up paying the system anyway. So we got to learn how to beat that in a different form. That's why I use, you know, hip hop as a tool of war. I'm grateful for the opportunities, because even the art museum still didn't know how to figure me out when I first came in, but they knew I was a great gatherer. Because there was one thing about me. There's nothing you could tell me, and I'm not there to offend anybody, but I'm going to find a way to bring my people together. You know, and I'm just like, regardless, because that's how we started with hip hop culture. We started with nothing. Nothing. We were poor. But give me some time and I'll show you what we can do. Just give me a moment. You know, and I kept pushing and pushing. But I'm just grateful to be surrounded among you greats, because you two are advocates for your community. We fight for humanity. And that's where I'm at. I don't want to hurt people. I want to love people. And I want our people to know that. So that's my introduction.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Iz. I just learned a lot. The definition of hip hop is one of them. So, all right. So tonight we're kind of talking about, you know, the in between of racism. So my first question to each of you, and we'll just kind of go in the order, and then I do have some individual questions for you. But do you feel left out of the conversation often when we talk about racism because of the concentration on Black and white divide? Or do you feel that that your particular race is left out? And I know you have a different answer for that. So, because I don't think you think of things as race, but Pei-Jen?
Not necessarily. I know most of the time when we talk about it, we talk about, you know, Black communities, how they face discriminations and system of inequity. But at the same time, I guess because it's my role, I guess, like, whenever I see it, I feel like this is our collective problem. This is what we need to look at. It is not just about Black community. It's not just about white community. It's not just about Asian. It's all of us. It affects every single one of us. So I don't necessarily personally feel left out, but I do hear some of our community when we lift up certain group, certain historically marginalized, underserved voices group. I do hear people feel they are left out. I do feel that. But personally, I don't, because I see this as a collective issue. We are part of this society. We're part of the community. So I don't necessarily feel left out. You know, that I identify as immigrant, I identify as Asian American, also identify as American, as part of the society. So I don't. That's a simple answer, I guess.
No right or wrong. Nena?
Well, the idiom Black and white, as it's defined by American dictionaries, is a simple, clear distinction of opposites, with examples given of good and bad, right and wrong. And every dictionary I looked in for that definition, those were the two examples that they gave, good and bad, right and wrong. I think that this simplified social recognition invokes thoughts of good and bad when you talk about people. right or wrong, with the color white being good and black being bad. And it serves to, I think, simplify and codify and normalize, if you will, that idea of white superiority. By simply making it a black or white category, it erases all other experiences. As for Native Americans, this ideology, it refuses to acknowledge the genocide, and it perpetuates the idea that Native Americans are long gone, a vanished people who only existed in the past. And it further that intentional erasure, I think. It's important to note that historically, at no point has it ever been the objective of European colonists to create more Indians. The objective has always been to reduce the number. It was then, and it still is to this day.
Thank you.
So
Sorry, I'm so sorry. No, breathe. Go ahead.
So when you ask that question, do I feel left out of the racism conversation? I really don't feel left out. I feel as though popular American culture is trying to wipe me out.
Thank you.
I guess I could talk now.
Yeah, it's your turn.
No, in no type of way can I be left out or feel left out. I think my background says too much. We were the only Peruvian family at Flatbush and Church Ave. We were, all my neighbors were Jamaican or Haitian, so it was a part of me. People, were confused, trust me, growing up, and people always tell me like, yo, like, why do you think black? Like, why do you think? I'm just like, I never saw a separation. Number one, I've also accepted my African roots. Everyone needs to accept that. It's in your DNA. It's a part of your hue. It's the origins of life. And if you're going to be indigenous or you're going to be native, anybody, you better respect that, because we have to respect our elders. So we have to respect our origins. And that, for me, that is law. That's the reason why I do advocate a lot for it, because it's not really sometimes that I'm having these conversations with white folks. I'm having these conversations with my indigenous folks. And I have to check them and let them know, like, if your brother and sister is struggling, you need to do your part and protect them as well. It's your responsibility. And so I never do feel left out. If anything, I feel ready to fight and ready to defend. So I never want to see a separation of people. But if I see somebody getting hurt, and especially it's weight on one side, I'm going to be on that side that needs the help. So
Becca, when I look at the question you were asking, like, do you feel left out? It just remind me of a I think it was a poem. I'm not sure. It was a saying that by a Lutheran pastor, a German Lutheran pastor. I just Google it. It says Martin de Molière. First, I don't know, probably you've heard about it. First, they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I'm not trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. So I don't feel like that. I feel like we should all speak up and support each other, because at the end, they'll come for you, and then nobody's going to be there to speak for you. I just remind me of that. Yes.
Yeah, that's one of my favorites. Now, I've been chomping at the bit to ask is this question. So when I was looking for someone to represent the Latino community, someone said to me, check with Iz at the museum. And I was like, I know Iz, I love Iz, great. So I asked him, could he come on and speak to Latinx experiences? I'm not going to give you the answer he gave me, but I would like him to give you the answer and then kind of explain what it means, because I think it's very poignant.
Yeah, it's a tough question because a lot of people, I know we about evolving, but we also have to remember about our roots. It ain't about X. It ain't about it. You got people have to realize when you claim Latin or Hispanic as an indigenous person, you're being claimed that you're conquered. You're being claimed that you're branded. You're being claimed that you're enslaved. They take away everything about our rights. They take away everything about our roots, our indigenous. Nobody would know. They would know that, oh, you're Latin or you're Hispanic. Imagine if I taught a young brother that, and that's what happened to me. Because people told me, this is who you are. They didn't tell me about my roots. They didn't tell me that I came from a great Inca empire. They didn't tell me I came from a great nation. They didn't tell me that I built all this. It would have been a different type of mind if I was taught that from the start. Instead of thinking that my people could only be dishwashers or farmers or laborers or just janitors. There's a difference. There's a reason why they put those terms there. That's to brand you. And I cannot let that happen anymore. As the spirit of Tupac Amaru, the last Inca Empire king who fought for the rights of indigenous rights, I'm going to make sure that they know that about our native rights. They're going to make sure that they know we're part of these lands, just like the rest of the other lands. That's why I don't even use the word immigrant. We're migrants. We migrate just like the birds. We migrate just like the butterflies. We come back and forth. It's our nature. But we have to be careful. And when we use the words like the evolve, these are not terms that are used by the people. These are terms used by corporations that have other interests. You can't even look up the origins of who created this word. But corporations know how to market it on you. And especially us as people with, from the indigenous nations of Abayala, America, South America, Central America, we're commodity to them. There was a reason why brothers like Che Guevara was fighting, against capitalism. There was a reason for this stuff. Who are you to determine our goods, our values? Who are you to determine, but you can get rich off of our goods and you give us 6 cents off of it. So that's why I have to do this for my ancestors. We have to remember, how are we going to grow if we don't even know our roots? And when you put Latinx on it, you erase all of that. And that's my stance on it.
Wow, thank you. And it's a very legitimate stance. I think we do forget, my husband labeled Latino, he's Puerto Rican, but he is Deo. Also 4 countries in Africa, which probably, so he is indigenous and not necessarily Latinx. And you even think about the language is Spanish, it's not necessarily native to the countries that speak it, right? Yeah. I mean, so it's an erasure of a culture, of many cultures. That's the other thing about the term Latino is there's not, even in our country, there's no such thing as the same. Like there's all different types of people and different cultures. And, we want to just put, this is what these people are like and put them in a little bucket as opposed to like embracing who we are and where we come from.
And specifically that the word Latin all originates from the Roman Empire. What does that got to do with us? You feel me? So they push this on you, the conquistadores, that all took place on us.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to, realize like, this is how we lose our identity, and it creates issues like immigration. It creates issues in policies, you know what I mean? That it dehumanizes us, if anything. It lets us know we don't have the same rights as other folks. And that's why, like, there was never, for me personally, I know people speak about it as gender here and there, but have they ever thought for 1 second that the word indigenous is genderless? There's no reason to create it. It was there already, the foundation, and we forget about that because we we move so fast, social media is so quick and everything, you know, and we don't realize how it feeds us. But I'm grateful now that more people are realizing, because even the associations that, you know, that represent, you know, let's say the Hispanic or Latino community have dropped it from their sites. They've realized only 3% of people identify with it. There's nothing wrong with it if you want to identify it for yourself, if that's what we want to claim. No one is taking that away from you. But just be careful not blanketing over a whole group of people. Don't use it as an umbrella for other people. Let, just like anybody else here, be equal and let them represent themselves. You know, we have that choice, but corporate America does not give us that choice. It pushes it, it pushes it, it pushes it. Look, when we talk about Asian folks, they don't even think about how many different tribes are in Asia. They don't think about how many different countries, right? Same thing with Africa. They think everybody's African. No, they don't even identify in Africa. They'll tell you their land, their country, their tribe. It's a continent, you know? And that's what I mean. Like, we have to be America, white supremacy, we'll say, make sure they're up there, but it belittles us, anybody else with a different hue or a different color, you know? But that's my stance on it, so.
No, I really appreciate, I appreciate this conversation. Nena, I put a question on there to you about, you know, we have in Delaware, we have passed bills to talk about the Holocaust. And this past year, we passed a bill to talk about Black history. But as of yet, there is nothing in our, it's unfortunate we have to teach a law pass a law to do this too. But there's nothing around Indigenous Native Americans. And so do you think that's necessary? I mean, obviously we know that it's intentional on all parts. So I don't think we have to do that, but what do you think? Because I just know a little bit about you, and I knew you learned a lot about your culture from growing up. But what are other people missing? I know there was more than one question in there. You're on mute.
I'm sorry, that has to happen once in every meeting, right? So I was it. Your question was, do I think that the history should be taught in schools, the histories of Native Americans, genocide, American Indians, genocide? Absolutely, I do. I believe it should be taught. It should be part of the regular curricula. But I also believe that the information should come from American Indian people and not from a colonial perspective. I think schools should look for Native sources and Native resources, like Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz said, with an Indigenous people's history of the United States, and Raoul Peck, Exterminate All the Brutes, and Philip DeJoria. I mean, I think there's a lot of good information out there and resources from American Indian people. And I think that that's where it should come from. And the next question you had for me was, what do I think that people should know?
Yeah.
Let's see.
I know there's a lot to that, but you know, maybe things that we don't know overall.
Well, one of my desires is for people to know that they're still here and present. Even though there were many erasure tactics that were used against them, murder wasn't the only one. There was also forced assimilation, but the most successful tactic was reclassification. This speaks to what you were talking about. It's just reclassifying it. This is what they called them. And so they ceased to be Indian people. So in the eyes of the government. But the system was set up for people where it was too dangerous for them to identify as American Indians because there were penalties for that, which included death or murder. And so many people spent generations hiding in plain sight. And if you think that's a myth, you know, I bet just on this, in this audience today, you know, how many of them have heard in their family that they have some sort of American Indian ancestry in their family? A lot of times those aren't just stories. I mean, these are people who got reclassified and re-identified. And I bet there's more than one. Because in every group, you find some who ended up like that. And I think one of the other things that I think that people should know about Native Americans is that they had, and this goes to what is said too, they had a very vibrant history and lifeway before the Europeans got there for tens of thousands of years. And the only history we teach is, you know, the last 250. Well, we might kick it up to 300, you know, maybe 400 in some cases, but usually it is just colonial history, even though there was tens of thousands of years of history that came before that. They don't believe that, you know, that they were a viable people. They didn't really care. I think what I want people to take away most is that Native American people are real, living human beings. They're not inferior, they're not savages. As a matter of fact, they were pretty smart. A lot of people think that, you know, they were always engaged in warfare. You know, just archaeologically speaking, we don't have any evidence of a single war that ever took place in North America prior to colonial contact. Not one shred of evidence. And you have to understand that there's not even so much as 1 square foot of North American soil that was not occupied by the American Indian people. And we don't have any evidence of any wars that ever took place. Obviously, there was such an abundance of trade that was going from coast to coast and up and down the country, even into Central America and South America. There was a lot of trade going on that there's not even a single archaeological site, Native American site in North America that doesn't have some degree of non-local materials in it. That's how extensive the trade was. I mean, it was probably close to the trade that we have today. There was a lot of trade and people were trading all over this country. And you know, they don't really think about that. Even in the state of Delaware, we look at all of the stone tools that we find in those archaeological sites. But, you know, Delaware, we have a very, very small amount of even nappable stone. That's up at Iron Hill. All the rest of that stuff is coming from somewhere else. Because, you know, once you go below the canal, there is no rock bed here. It's, you know, sand and silt. You can dig to the center of the earth and you're not going to hit rock bed here. So that stone had to come from somewhere. And there was a lot of it. It's in every site we look at. So they weren't innovative people. And they were obviously getting along well enough to trade and to trade that extensively. So.
Thank you. And Pei-Jen, you can answer this question to the, like, if there's any kind of, I know it's kind of a deep question, but the past couple years, you know, Asian American racism has been in the news. And I will say statistically, and I only say this statistically, I don't mean this that the appearance is that Asian Americans are hugely successful and that this doesn't really occur. And how have you felt during this period of a highlight on Asian Americans?
Mhm.
And I said, you know, if this is triggering or upsetting to you, don't worry about it. We can ask a different question, but I didn't, if you have any kind of thoughts.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, it was definitely chilling and painful to watch, 80-year-old, 70-year-old grandmas get pushed and face violence in on the news. And remember, I think it was last March, 6 East Asian women were murdered in Atlanta just because they were Asian women. So it's definitely very painful to watch that. And you mentioned that, like how you just mentioned, like, the Asian American population view as, social economical successful. And I think that's one thing that I want to, when you say, what do you want other community to understand about Asian American communities? And that's one thing I want to bring to light is the model minority myth. All Asian Americans are hardworking employees. They are law-abiding citizens, straight A students. These labels actually are harmful to the stereotypes. Are harmful not only for an Asian American community, also to for other minorities. It's really the model minority stereotype is really a tool that minimize the role of racism and other social injustice that are behind many minority group struggles. Is very dangerous and detrimental for Asian Americans. First of all, many stereotypes are simply just wrong. You're like, oh, all Asians are good at math. Good, not all of them are good at math. I'm not good at math. All Asians are doctors and lawyers. That's not true either. One is not true. Second, it's like what Eve was saying. It ignores the communities, the vast diversity of the community. That as social, Eve was saying earlier, it's just convenient for us to put people in a bucket, right? But then we don't see each one of you as individuals and understand the vast, vibrant, drastic different cultural and background. And thirdly, the model minority actually it condition Asian American to live within the stereotype. At the same time, it's fostering racism in our community. So that's what I want to bring to light, that the stereotype, it sounds like you are paying compliment to a whole group of not monolithic group, but it's actually very harmful.
Thank you. I think to your point, I think you're talking about how divisive it can be because it's often used as a tool, we know, to separate us. Even during slavery, and there were poor whites or, indentured servants, the slave owners would say, oh, you're better than the slaves, so we're going to give you a leg up. Do you think that that's, and any of you guys could take this, but do you think that's just a way to separate, the non-white races so that they're kind of in competition with each other?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And that sort of ideology of we got to keep them, we can't let them all get together because we're not going to be able to continue to control them or to dominate them. And, we saw that with Bacon's Rebellion.
Mm-hmm.
He got everybody together. Of course, he got got stopped, but they did have a rebellion, and it struck fear in those, wealthy landowners and enslavers. It struck fear in them. So they were like, "Oh, we can't have this anymore. We gotta put a barrier. We gotta put some conflict between these groups, because if they come together, they could really do some damage, or they could take their freedom back."
Go ahead, Is. I think you're gonna.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think America has proved itself to try to separate us for so many times. I mean, because the reality is we're the majority. We are not the minority. One of the things of history that we learned that for me personally was the Buffalo Soldiers. Who were they hunting? Think about that. Forced to kill natives, forced to kill indigenous folks. Not even knowing, because they thought they were doing it for their freedom. But that's how it is, using war against us, enviness, let's just say, planting that seed of jealousy when there is none in the first place. I always have to explain people like some of the great wars that people don't realize, like here's one, Cinco de Mayo. Everybody feels it's a Mexican celebration here and there, not realizing what that war really meant. If the Mexican people lost that war, the Confederate Army would have spread it out throughout Mexico. They wanted to collect human beings, more enslavement, more people. They're not realizing that Black and Brown had to fight together for that war. And I'm just like, dang, it took pueblos, it took people, it took old people, it took the elders, everybody picked up a pitchfork here and there, because they wanted their money. But you know where money went? People. They're like, okay, I want to take your people, so we're going to spread slavery a little bit more. But that's how they try to trick us. They try to play us against us, to separate us in prisons, especially. So they build that on us because they know we're the majority. We're a threat. It's not even a threat really I don't know when people think about the threat that they envision, because it's not a violent one. It's about land ownership. It's about property values. It's about, you know what I mean? Because if more people knew that they're indigenous rights, because we also have to study the word Native America. The word Native is in front of America. That means our Native people, we were here before America. The more people they start learning, understand what that means you have more right to this land than any other folk that ever came here and settled here. That's a threat. And they try to dumb us down, not teach us about our indigenous cultures, our Native culture. And we have to look at that. We have to observe that. We have to be like, Dad, if our people only knew the culture we've brought, the science we've brought, the math, when plumbing, everything, it's been there. But when they make it against us, for my brothers to teach them, about slavery, that's where you come from here and there, not realizing many have already been here already. So we can't look at one color of folks and just always say, go. We've all heard the terms, all the terms, not realizing we've already been here. So Native Americans, we come in different hues and different colors, and we are known as the children of the sun for a reason. So we just gotta but like you were talking about education, it's important we add that into it. It's important that we teach them before slavery. It's important that we teach them how great this land has been before. And like she said, I don't know of great wars. I mean, there's tribal wars, but we're just talking about, in most wars, if there was any, especially in South America, it was over a woman. That's the crazy thing, And that's our people. But that's human nature, So we learn. So I appreciate it.
Oh, no, I appreciate the conversation. I think someone in the, go ahead, Nena.
I was going to add to that about, this idea of even land and the living environment. Land itself means something very different. and to indigenous people or to American Indian people or Native American people, it means something very, very different. Land is not a commodity. Land is not real estate. Land is not something you purchase, you know, you farm it, you mine it, you develop it, and oh, well, land is an intricate living part of the culture. And land includes everything, all, not just rocks and dirt. It includes all of the living things that inhabit it. And that is a part of their life and their culture. And so land is like a family member. Land is like your mother. Land is that which nurtures life. It protects life. And every now and again, it has to discipline life, very much like the female persuasion of all species. So land was something that was an intricate part of your daily life. And to have somebody, it's not something that belonged to us, it's something that we belong to, like you belong to your mother. And the benefits that come from that, as opposed to it belongs to some guy from across the sea. And he's now telling you that you're cut off from all of the resources and all of the nurturing that the land has provided for you. Now you're cut off from that because I'm going to take that and dig it up or tear it down or destroy it. So it really just, you know, if they could teach them their connectedness to the land, that would help young people. That because without it, you know, we have a saying, if you're a frog, you can't drink up all of the water in your pond or you won't have anywhere to live. I mean, most cultures learned how to preserve and sustain their resources. They learned that lesson tens of thousands of years ago. Why can't the Europeans learn that lesson? Because it's easier to say, we tore up all of our stuff and used it all up and squandered it. We're just, instead of next time trying to be, you know, more cautious and preserve it, we're just going to go steal somebody else's and take somebody else's.
Yeah, thank you for that, Nena. Theo had his hand raised. I don't know if you still want to talk, but I'm gonna unmute you. And then we have about 15 minutes for some questions. So if you have any questions for the audience or comments or anything, feel free. You can either raise your hand or put some questions or comments in the thing. So Theo, are you there? I think I'm asking to unmute.
Can you hear me?
Oh, there we go. Yes.
Okay. Actually, I'm Theo Brunskill, and I raised my hand because I am, you know, always enthralled in what Nena says. And one of the stories that she tells, you know, the misconception of how many natives were here before colonization. So I would, you know, I think everybody would benefit from hearing her say it again.
I often talk about this sort of unrealistic narrative that they tell about Native American people before the Europeans got there. Never mind the fact that they had a trade system that was equal to, if not greater than, the Silk Road. But we somehow have this idea in our mind that there were these few little scattered groups of people in North America, and it was pretty much empty. That's why they came here and sort of took the land, and it was pretty much empty. But, you know, there were hundreds of millions of people in Europe. There were hundreds of millions of people in the Middle East. There were hundreds and hundreds of millions of people in Africa. There were hundreds and hundreds of millions of people in Asia. There were hundreds of millions of people in South America. Why on earth would North America have been empty? Given they have the same amount, if not more, sustainable resources. Why would North America have been an empty continent with all of the resources that they have? That just absolutely doesn't make sense. And the fact that there was so much trade going on, there would have to be a population in the hundreds and hundreds of millions for that to occur. So this sort of concept, and then so because then you have to ask the question, if they say that, yes, there really was a whole lot of Native American people here, then you have to ask the question, what happened to them all? Because we're trying to make them disappear. As I said, it has never, ever been the objective to create more Indians. How did they all disappear? So somebody comes up with this bright idea, like, oh, they all caught smallpox and they all died, or the common cold, because they had no immunity, so they all died. Okay, that defies the law of averages. Hundreds of millions of people died from smallpox. First of all, there would be some that would be able to have some immunity. Secondly, by the time smallpox came over here, you know, they had a vaccine for smallpox in the 1600s. And they actually got it from the Middle East, who had it for, I don't know how many hundreds of years. So it wasn't as if smallpox, yes, it was bad when it ran rampant, but there were things that you could do about it, and they knew about it, and it didn't kill everyone. So we tell this narrative that 95% of the people died from smallpox. I'm sorry, but I'm not buying it. That defies the law of averages. You would never be able to wipe out that many people. And besides that, it didn't wipe out all the people in Central America or South America or Africa or the Middle East or Asia. It didn't wipe them all out, and it was introduced there as well. So why all of a sudden when North America have been so susceptible to it would be devastating? It defies the law of averages. These narratives that are created to deflect from the real question, which is, why were you trying to kill all the Indians? Why was that your goal? And by the way, that was the goal before they left Europe. It wasn't like they got here and said, oh, you know, we don't like these people, we should try and kill them. That was the objective with the doctrine of discovery and the papal bulls before they even took sail to come to this country. That was the objective. So I'm sorry, I get a little emotional.
No. I so appreciate your passion, and I'm pretty sure that everybody on here does. You know, the strangest thing just occurred to me. So, you know, when I was in high school, I learned history, and the histories that I learned was the Roman Empire. I learned some about, you know, the Ming Dynasty. And as you're speaking, Nena, I'm thinking to myself, I don't remember learning anything about that time period in North America. Like you said, was it empty, right? Because I'll be honest, that's, without teaching it, that's what's left in my mind, right? Because we're learning about all the others. And even Africa itself, you know, I do see my good friend Bibi Coker's on here, and she is someone who is an extreme advocate for learning about Black history before it was in America, because there's so much to it. And I have just recently learned a lot of that. I mean, recently, like last month or something, but the last several years, I have just learned about how gifted Black Americans were when they came here, and how much they knew and shared and was just taken from them. And I don't want to assume, but Nena, I think that's the same thing with Native Americans, is there was already so much here, and how to plant, how to soil, how to live off the land. That
Absolutely.
was just kind of.
And how to sustain. I always tell the story about, you know, in European history, you see the domestication of animals coming in, you know, the 6th and 7th and 8th centuries. It starts to get really big. So they're starting to cut down trees. They're killing off all the wildlife. And pretty soon their resources are becoming very limited. And they begin to understand that we're going to have to branch out because we don't have enough resources to sustain us. That's why you see this very big, poor population that doesn't have resources to sustain themselves. That's why you see all of these wars taking place back and forth all the time, because in order to have a war, you have to have one group that doesn't have enough, and that'll start a war every time. But, you know, in North America, there were enough sustainable resources, and even with all that we've squandered, there are still enough sustainable resources that we could sustain the world population. But it won't be that way for long if we keep squandering them. But the native people knew how to preserve and conserve their resources. They didn't believe in let's kill out to the last buffalo. Let's kill out every beaver. Let's kill out all of the wildlife, because all of the living beings in the living environment play an important role and in the circle. If you take a section out of a circle, the circle it does not continue to be a circle. So if you don't think that I'm kidding, think back on your childhood when you were watching all of those documentaries about the wildlife shows, and they had the wildlife of South America, the wildlife of Africa, the wildlife here and there, but you've never seen a documentary about the wildlife of Europe. Because they've killed most of it. It's gone, and it's been gone for a very, very long time. That kind of wildlife that you see in other continents, you don't see that in Europe. And I've never in my life seen a documentary about the wildlife of Europe.
You look like you have something to say.
I was wondering, just a question.
Yeah, please.
Is Russia considered Europe?
Yeah, could, but now,
Asia too. It's
yeah.
Mongolia.
No, I'm not including
it's split in
Asia.
half.
Yeah, it's kind of split now. That's sort of Western
Part
Europe.
Asia and part Europe.
Yeah, the only reason why I say
They
that,
seem to be pretty good at preserving their resources in Russia. They have some wildlife there.
yeah, that's what I was saying. It's so dense. A lot of people don't really realize how dense it is in Mongolia, like how that impacted the world.
Oh yeah.
You know, but I am marveled by Russia's wildlife, because that's a whole nother world that we really don't know. But I was also too, like a lot of people don't realize how Mongolia has reindeers, you know, so, and the culture, the indigenous folks that raised them, you know, so I'm just like, wow, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
But no, you were just making me think about documentaries. I was like, you know what, I don't think I've ever seen a documentary on Europe or like British wildlife. I don't
Yeah.
know. So I know Ireland has beautiful scenery, so beautiful.
Yes, they
Yeah.
do.
I have another question for Nena. I know there was a news, I believe it was yesterday. Pope Francis went to Canada and did a apology tour to Indigenous people because of the school abuse the children for so many years. I just wonder what you think about how now that, you know, Pope Francis is actually going around and have an apology tour.
But I don't think he's still, I still don't think he's going to rescind the papal bulls, is he? I saw the article, but I really didn't get to read it. Is he going to rescind the papal bulls?
I think you have to explain what that means.
Yeah, I don't know what that
Okay.
means.
The papal bulls were, it was the doctrine of discovery. It was in the middle part of the 1400s. That was the first one. And the Pope wrote a bull, which is sort of like a bulletin or a paper. And he wrote it for the King of Portugal, which said, you have permission as a Christian to go forward in the world and seize and conquer all of the lands and all of the peoples who are non-Christian people, all of the Saracens who are the Muslims, and everyone who is not a Christian is considered an enemy of Christ. And you must go and either lay waste to them or put them in perpetual slavery, take all of their lands, take all of their goods and all of their resources. That is their goal. And so that's what they did. And that was the start. And then, so the church was really kind of behind this mass colonization, and to, you know, to sort of take stuff from other people and to dominate and subjugate peoples. And so that started a trend. Other countries got involved. You know, Portugal was involved, Spain, England. At the end, everybody was involved, all in the name of the church. We're going for the church. But, you know, the church said, you know, whatever bounties you have, you know, some's got to come here to the church. You have to give up some.
Yeah, we have about 5 minutes left, and this might not have been exactly the conversation I was thinking about, but this was absolutely amazing. I think people learn so much history, and we don't have time to go into it. But Nena, I love that you shared with me about how many Native tribes were led by women and
Yes.
That culture. So maybe we'll come back and do something all about that in a couple months. But if you guys want to kind of close out, everybody just take a couple minutes. We'll go backwards. We'll start with and then we'll go to Nena, and we'll end with Pei-Jen.
And you were saying like to leave a mark, in other words?
Yeah, just your last couple. Yeah.
Ooh.
You know,
Like to all my people out there that are listening, start digging into your indigenous roots, start learning more about it, start learning about before the books that they gave you, and do the research on your own, and look at the wonders that we've created, you know? And I want you to know, teach the youth that, mainly. Teach them the truth about their roots. And you will have a better society growing up, because we're growing up in a time now where a lot of people question their purpose. Just look into your indigenous roots and you'll know your purpose. That'll be my piece.
thank you. I'm going to ask a follow-up question. How will people find that?
For me,
Yeah.
look up your origins.
Okay.
Type in the word origins to everything, matter of fact.
Yeah.
You know, so anytime you want to, like, the origins of potatoes, the origins of beef jerky, like, and you'd be marveled where this all stuff comes from. But that's what I mean. Like, there's a reason why all these things happen.
Okay.
So just type in the word origins.
But still, I guess we're depending on Google to be accurate. Right?
Oh, well, I don't know. So one thing I started noticing about indigenous books and a lot of native books were being erased and taken away from libraries. Me, myself, I started collecting so many. I was kind of marveled at how many indigenous books that get thrown out, but the truth is in the books.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Nena?
I would have to piggyback on what is said. Yes, the truth is in the books by indigenous people, because you don't find a lot of truth in the narratives that come from a colonial perspective. I think that looking at your ancestry, everybody is indigenous to somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Look at where you came from. Look at what your people did. I mean, you know, there's a lot of people who think that, you know, as mankind evolves, we get smarter and smarter, but I don't really know that that's true. I don't believe that. I'm with you is the ancestors, you know, they had it going on. Mm-hmm. And even our elders, they got it going on. I think there is a lot of things that people could learn about life and living and how to do good and how to be a community person, just by looking at some of the ideologies that come from your indigenous roots, not capitalism and not, mock a democratic republic. Look at how communities lived together and how the people got along and how they realized the importance of each one to you. I always say in Native American culture, the idea is not I am because I have achieved and I am because I'm all that. It is I am because you are. And you are because I am. And without you, I'm not going to be able to make it. And you're not going to be able to make it without me. So it would always be in our best interest to make sure you have everything you need to survive and be happy, just like it always be in your best interest, my best interest to make sure. So it's something to think about, that we actually need people. We are social creatures.
Pei-Jen.
I love that, Nina. I love that. So I am because you are here, all here. I love it. I love it. I guess the last word I just want to, share my learning is whenever we talk about race, in my workshop and first I just want to share, like, just be comfortable with uncomfortable, and embrace the discomfort of not knowing. It's okay that we don't know, and it's okay that we recognize our differences when we meet. I don't naturally, when we meet people who are different from us, we're just afraid of making mistake, say the wrong thing. But as long as we are genuinely curious and ask authentic questions, withhold the judgment, because we all have unconscious bias, withhold that judgment, but ask genuine questions that we can all learn from each other. And I love what Is and Nina talk about is you have to start from yourself. You have to start about owning your own story, owning your roots, find out who you are, what's your story, and then use that empathy to understand people who are different from you. What are the similarities, and how do we celebrate together and appreciate each other? And we are gonna make mistakes. That's what I always say. We're all gonna make mistakes, and don't let that mistake deter us from getting better every day.
Thank you all so much for joining us tonight. Thank you, thank you, Nina, thank you, Pei-Jen. Nina, you had me crying a little bit. I'll be very honest, and I just had the exact same conversation with Is the other day, and we talked about survival of the fit. Actually, I took your survival of the fittest. And that's where I learned that from. And you can have one big guy, and we all depend on each other, right?
Yes.
So I mean, that is survival. And hopefully with the love that we're all putting out there, that we can kind of make a more beautiful place for all of us. So
Yeah.
Learned so much from Is and Pei-Jen. I want to thank them very much for sharing. It's always very eye-opening and wonderful talking to you. And Beck, I want to thank you so much for inviting me and having this panel discussion.
yeah, it was great. Thank you guys. Have a good night. And if you want to share the video, feel free. It'll be up probably by the end of tonight. Thank you guys again. I appreciate it. Go forth.
Thank you.
Thank you.